Oh, we're live on the Player Profiler YouTube channel. I'm Seth Diewold. That's Matt Babich. And today, what are we doing today, Matt Babich?
Well, we're kicking off 2024 in style. We have just had the regular season close for the 2023 NFL season. So everyone and their mother right now in the Dynasty Leagues is now moving on to the 2024 rookie draft. In Dynasty Leagues, we don't concern ourselves with the playoffs. Our year isn't over. We got a game plan for the year ahead. So we're going to drop, Seth and I, for the first time ever, we're putting together our Dynasty Cornerstone rankings. So for those who don't know what Cornerstone rankings are, they're simply Dynasty rankings with some upcoming rookies baked in. So we're going to have our 2024 rookies alongside our current Dynasty rankings. Pre-draft, we're going to have this all season. It'll be changing throughout the process, but we're going to unveil our top 25 tonight. And if you caught the description or the show description, you know that we're going to be talking Marvin Harrison Jr. and Caleb Williams. So spoiler alert, they may appear on one or both of our lists tonight. So Seth, I mean, this is a big moment for us. We're rankings people now.
That's right. We're debuting our rankings live on the show. This would intimidate some people, but it's not. It's no big deal for us. It's no big deal. So without further ado, why don't we hit the bumper and start the show? Sound good?
Run it.
All right. So let's see how this looks. Might need to enhance it a little bit. Let's see here. Little that look better. Maybe a little more. Maybe a little bit more.
A little bit more.
So there we go. All right. That looks okay. Maybe we get rid of this banner.
Yeah, I was just
maybe we get rid of the banner. So this is what we've done. So we've ranked these players, and we have a composite score for them, which is the average of Matt and I's rankings. So what I'm going to do throughout this is I'm going to slowly unveil these rankings. I mean, the top 5 is kind of boring, so we'll start there with the top 5. It looks like Matt and I are pretty in lockstep with the top 4. And I don't know if there's really much to say here. The only difference is that you have Burrow at 6 and I have Burrow at 5. Yep. I mean, I guess we could talk about, like, I don't really have any concerns about Joe Burrow bouncing back from his injury, from his arm. What was it? A ligament in his arm. I think he's going to be just fine to start next season with Jamar Chase, and we'll see what they do with T. Higgins. But Joe Burrow, a locked and loaded top 5 quarterback for me. Is any discussion here? Or should we move on to the next 5, Matt?
Yeah, no, I can hit my number 5 quarterback or my number 5 player, and spoiler alert, it's quarterback, when we get to him. But yeah, I don't have concerns over Joe Burrow either. It's just this player is special.
Got it. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal the next 5. It gets a little spicier. And so I have Herbert at 6. You have Stroud at 5. That's a pretty big difference. I have Stroud at 12. That's going to be, we'll have to talk about that. Then the wide receivers for me, I have Jefferson, Chase, and CeeDee Lamb. That's going to be a discussion throughout the process. I think they're back to back for me. I think you can present a really good case for Jamar Chase being number 1 overall because the quarterback uncertainty for Justin Jefferson, although I don't know if there's really that much uncertainty there. I think it's going to be Kirk Cousins. And if it's Kirk Cousins, I'm more than okay with Justin Jefferson as my wide receiver 1. And then there's CeeDee Lamb. He has quarterback certainty as well with Dak Prescott, and he had an absolute killer end to the season, probably propelled many people to Dynasty in the Dynasty playoffs and the Dynasty championship. So I think we got to talk about CJ Stroud. Why is CJ Stroud number 5 for you?
Well, he finished as the quarterback 7 as a rookie. And a lot of times with these prolific prospects, including Joe Burrow, he didn't have a top 10 season his rookie season. It was, in fact, rather disappointing. He exited early due to injury. But then we saw year 2, absolute explosion. Lamar Jackson, second year in the league. Granted, he didn't play much as a rookie. or second season as a starter, even from his first season as a starter, you see that explosion. And we're shifting in Dynasty to start playing in such short windows that I like where CJ Stroud has to go from here. So Texans, historically, even in the Deshaun Watson era, a historically run first team. They established and they were top 15 in team pass plays per game and a top 10 team in pace of play. So they're pushing the ball. There's a lot of offensive snaps and a lot of pass attempts for CJ Stroud going forward. And he was one of the most, one of the more efficient quarterbacks, one of the more accurate quarterbacks this year, displayed incredible pocket presence, displayed the ability to run even. And so I think while there wasn't a huge rushing floor this year, I do think that takes a step forward a little bit as he gets a little bit more comfortable to run. So I like Stroud's rushing floor. He's going to have 2 points, maybe 2 points a game. That's still significant, more of a rushing floor than Joe Burrow. And the Texans offense is not going to be done retooling. Nico Collins is great. Tank Dell is great. Dalton Schultz is pretty darn good, but these are not necessarily the brand name weapons that you're going to surround a guy like CJ Stroud with. So I think we get maybe a veteran wide receiver who can help CJ. I think they're going to eventually, I don't know how long Dalton Schultz's contract is, but I would imagine they're going to be moving on from him to try and get a more dynamic playmaker. This offense has room to grow. We don't know what's happening with T. Higgins. He could be franchise tagged. If he's not franchise tagged, that offense loses a significant producer. And Joe Burrow doesn't have a tight end. He has an aging pass catching running back. And then he has Jamar Chase. And so I firmly believe CJ Stroud's going to be in the top 5 fantasy quarterbacks by the end of next year. And if he's going to have a top 5 outlook for the next 2 to 3 seasons, that's worth putting him in the top 5, in my opinion. But, it's for what it's worth, it took me a long time to decide between CJ Stroud and Joe Burrow. So they're in the same tier. And if you go over to playerprofiler.com/Dynasty Deluxe, you can get the Player Profilers Dynasty rankings. They have a lifetime value score. So if we're going to talk about like a lifetime value score or like a score or a grade, they're right next to each other. But I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is and trade CJ Stroud for Joe Burrow plus if I'm capable of doing that.
Wow. So let me,
I don't, you know what I meant, but
yeah, I know what you meant. But let me just, I don't necessarily like when we're drafting this high, in Dynasty, like if you're at the 105 and you took CJ Stroud, I wouldn't be shocked. I'd say, okay, like you have your opinion. I think CJ Stroud's a locked and loaded quarterback from now until, whenever he decides to stop playing football. So I get it. I do understand, but I'm interested to hear your perspective on this. Like most dynasty leagues, I think Scott Fish said the average dynasty league lasts about 2.5 years. Not our Dynasty Roundtable leagues, by the way. Our Dynasty Roundtable league is going to last a long time because we have the best players in there, and maybe we'll do another one of those this year. Maybe not. We'll see. Keep your eye out for that. But I get he's young. He's 22. But Joe Burrow is also young. Justin Herbert's like, what, 27, 28, yeah. And then you go down the board and you look at quarterbacks like Dak Prescott, who's 30, 31, Kyler Murray, who has a much more a higher rushing ceiling than a guy like CJ Stroud. And I have CJ Stroud ranked 12, which, I don't think is a terrible ranking, but this is clearly where we're most different here at the start. But do you think that young quarterbacks, because this goes all the way back to last year with Bryce Young, and CJ Stroud was in this conversation too, which that paid off. Do you think that we overvalue young quarterbacks? You clearly don't think we undervalue or overvalue Stroud. I meant overvalue. I might have said undervalue. Do you think we overvalue like younger quarterbacks? Because like I can take a quarterback that's 30 years old or in heck, even Kirk Cousins, 35, and he's going to give me probably 2 to 3 more years of solid production.
Yeah, I mean, notice him when I gave my arguments there. I never once mentioned that Stroud is 5 years younger than Joe Burrow. If you plan on having an 18-year-long dynasty league, then sure, that will come into play. But both of these players are going to be in their primes, over the course of the expected lifespan of your dynasty league. So I'm not considering that too much. Spoiler alert, I don't even consider Dak's age too much when I look at his fantasy value, because truth be told, 33 is fairly young for a quarterback. We're seeing Aaron Rodgers play near 45. Saw Tom Brady play at 45. We saw, Hall of Fame quarterbacks play well into their late 30s. And Peyton Manning, off the top of my head, I'm going to guess and say he was 38 when he had that record-breaking season. So we still have a lot of scoring from these quarterbacks coming for quite a few more years. So the age is not really the reason I'm putting him over him.
Yeah, and I just think, like, if I'm structuring my team, if I'm at the back end, let's say I'm in a dynasty startup and I'm at pick 9, 10, 11, I miss out on that elite tier of quarterbacks, the Joe Burrows, Lamar, Patrick Mahomes. I'm looking to give myself an advantage. I think it's always been a struggle for me. Like, oh, do I go like with the best tier of wide receiver with the Jefferson or the Chase or the Lamb, or do I go for what I think is a tier 2 quarterback just because it's super flex and it's a quarterback? It's a fascinating conversation for me. And I think some of these quarterbacks I think they're a little bit overvalued. And it, like, as the years have gone on, and this is maybe just the way I dynasty now. I have Jefferson at 7, I have Chase at 8, I have Lamb at 9. I have that tier of wide receivers over some of these other quarterbacks. I just feel like it gives me an advantage that I can, and I can still draft a Kirk Cousins later, and I can still draft. We'll talk about some of these other quarterbacks, a Kyler Murray, maybe even a Dak Prescott later with my second pick, and still get a quarterback in a tier that I feel comfortable with a little bit later. I think I'm not saying it's a bad pick. I'm not, because I really do like CJ Stroud. It's not a battle, it's not really a battle that I want to fight, to be honest, because CJ Stroud, I mean, let's face it, he could, at the rushing upside, like the lack of that does concern me a little bit, which is why his ranking is a little bit down, but he still could be a top 5 fantasy quarterback from now until, you know what I mean? Like, I think the upside exists, especially if they add another weapon there. Like, who knows what they do in the off season. So it's just an interesting conversation. Like, do you go with the tier 1 wide receiver, or do you go with the first quarterback in tier 2? It's such a fascinating thing, because you ask 100 people, I feel like you get 50 answers over here and 50 answers over there.
Yeah, and I think you pointed out an interesting, split in the way we've done our rankings, because I completely agree with you. Like, if I'm on the clock and Allen gone, Hurts gone, Mahomes gone, Jackson gone, and I'm on the clock at 5, I'm not necessarily, let's say I'm at 6 and Joe Burrow's gone too. I'm not necessarily going Stroud or Herbert just because they're the best quarterback available and I'm in SuperFlex. So there's, in terms of being a SuperFlex league, I think of rankings closer to trade value, and then using that as your guide, as you go down the draft, because you have your tiers. And because if there was a trade and you're a QB needing team trying to acquire CJ Stroud, we've seen trades where guys like Jamar Chase, you trade Jamar Chase plus for CJ Stroud. Like, there's a premium on the position outside of the draft that really matters. And so that's why I have these game changer quarterbacks ahead of the tier 1 wide receivers, because when push comes to shove, when we look up trades, it's more likely than not that we're going to see the quarterback side heavied a little bit more. And it's just because of that premium that exists. So that's kind of why I have some of these players where I have them.
No, yeah, I totally get it, Matt. I totally get it. The chat is alive. We have the Harry Snowman in the chat. he has a new girlfriend. So
Clap it
congratulations
up.
to
Clap it
the
up for
Harry
Snowman.
Snowman. That's
Nice.
right. Got a new girlfriend. Anthony's in the chat. He's saying I'm showing my OSU hatred with with
Your bias
CJ
is
Stroud.
showing.
Yeah,
That Iowa bias.
I should have put Sam Laporta in the top 10. That's what I should have done. Harry Snowman again. Stroud is very good, but QBs are just not as important as they used to be to winning a championship. Case in point, Baker Mayfield. Set match point, Joe Flacco. I think that's a really interesting comment. Like, I think this year more than other years, like you were able to go get a Baker Mayfield or a Joe Flacco. Like if you were a contending team and let's say you lost Justin Herbert or something like that, you were able to go get, heck, even an Aiden O'Connell or a Jake Browning probably helped you out at some point, maybe. So like quarterbacks, I think like if you're at I'm not going to say like if you're at the top of the draft, it's like, oh, I'll take Justin Jefferson. No, I think obviously the first 6 picks to me is kind of like locked in stone. Maybe even 7 if you want to throw CJ Stroud in there. I'm fine with that. I won't, like I said, that's not the hill I want to die on, is debating you about how good CJ Stroud is, because he's really good. My point would be, I think to give myself the advantage, I would take the first tier of wide receiver and then draft quarterbacks later. But however you want a dynasty, I'm not going to fight you on that. But this is interesting that this was possible. Does this affect anything?
No, it's interesting,
Okay.
but like
Yeah.
go out and try and do that. Go out in a SuperFlex league, purposely tank quarterback because you can get them later, and try your hand at some mid to low tier backup quarterbacks and see what happens. Like it's way easier to say at the end of the 2023 season, well, Baker Mayfield was the QB 17 and Joe Flacco played really well. Okay, cool. We found Baker Mayfield, who was a slightly above average quarterback, actually slightly below average quarterback. In 32 starters in the NFL, he was 17th in fantasy points per game. So slightly below average. And Joe Flacco, an incredible outlier that happens when's the last time anything like Joe Flacco has happened in fantasy football? So, and the Podfather's done this too, talking about, late round QB, kind of, setting the table for 2024. And I don't think we should overlook a little bit of a correction where we see Joe Burrow injury, Justin Herbert, injury closer to the fantasy playoffs. And, the whole team was injured. They were in disarray with their coaching situation. Patrick Mahomes, not in a situation that he's used to being in. Jalen Hurts, hurt. Team seeing some injuries and dysfunction. This is a weird year for quarterbacks. Kyler Murray recovering from an ACL tear. So, or Trevor Lawrence hurt all the time. I mean, this is just a long list. And if we want to expect that to happen again, we have to expect all of these quarterbacks, or another long list of them, to go through these treacheries, all of these unlucky things that happen in a single season. It seems like a little short-sighted to lean that far and say, the QBs aren't that valuable anymore.
Yeah, I think maybe the better way to pose this question, and you can say, Seth, you're an idiot. That's fine. I've been called worse. Do you think that the quarterback 2 in a super flex, because all of these quarterbacks we're talking about, like, no debate, they're elite, but the quarterback 2 on your roster, do you think that position is overvalued by some people? Like, do you think you can fill it with a Baker Mayfield and be just fine?
Yeah, you can, but I do
because I think that's what we're talking about. I think that's what Harry is maybe talking about.
Harry has another comment where I don't know where it is, but he basically says you can fill it with another position, and so I would rather have CeeDee Lamb, obviously, like in my super flex, over a guy like Baker Mayfield. So if we go like further down our top 25 without revealing too many names, even some of those guys are probably maybe like a Garrett Wilson, somebody like that, like one, a tier 3 receiver, probably still want a quarterback because the boom possibility Like
Depends on the
it's way
quarterback.
easier for Baker to go out there and get 30 fantasy points than it is Garrett Wilson. That's just how things work. That's how the point system works.
Well, I think it depends on the wide receiver. Normally,
Yeah,
like
it depends on the player. And this is why there are so many sharp people who take so many different viewpoints of the game. There are a lot of ways to get things done. You don't have to. You can invest in a quarterback two, and then trade them and maybe get a guy like CeeDee Lamb in your SuperFlex. There's a million ways to get these things done. So if you strategize it right, absolutely, there are guys who you'd rather be in your SuperFlex than a mid-tier quarterback.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of guys like just feel like they have to get 2 quarterbacks with their first 2 picks in a startup. And I think as I go along in my dynasty journey, I'm like, I don't think so. Maybe we can wait a little bit and fill that quarterback 2 spot a little bit.
Yeah,
later,
I waited in the Dynasty Roundtable League. I didn't take a quarterback in the second.
Okay. So the fantasy plumber is saying it's not hard. It's not a hard argument to get Stroud to number 3. So that would mean that he would be ranked above Patrick Mahomes. Do you think you could get there with CJ Stroud?
I find it very hard to get him into the top 3 right now. To push him over Lamar Jackson would be tough. And I feel like I went pretty far putting him a step above, Joe Burrow. I think right now with the history of the success that Joe Burrow has had, CJ hasn't hit that level yet. I think he will, but I think the argument to push him above into that tier with Joe Burrow is pretty tough, but I did it. I don't think I can get him past Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I think you probably have him as high as I would put him. And you see my ranking there. So, but if you I couldn't put him above Lamar like that or Mahomes. Like I just couldn't do it. But hey, maybe we're wrong. People also forget that you don't have to play a quarter. Okay.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about.
That's the one you were talking about. Yeah, that's what we talked about. It's true. It just kind of depends on your roster. If you have a really strong roster and you have, it just kind of depends on that player versus, the quarterback. But I would say the good majority of the time, to Matt's point, the quarterback has way more of an opportunity to score points because they have way more opportunities. Like they have the ball in their hands every play. So it's a lot easier for them to score more points. And again, it comes down to rankings and weekly rankings during the season and opportunity and matchup and all that stuff. So, because I guess that's more of a lineup question, but so we'll go ahead and reveal the next 5. Keep the chat coming. We'll answer as many of your questions as possible as we go through this process, and we'll engage with you. So keep the chat going. Our next 5 are Anthony Richardson. Wow, we have a pretty big gap there too. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, and I have Marvin Harrison at 14, and he comes in at player number 6 or ranked number 16, tied with AJ Brown. So that's pretty high. I have him higher than you. So much to talk about here, but I think we should probably start with Anthony Richardson. You have him at number 8. I have him at number 15. And maybe this comes back to the quarterback conversation we were having where, maybe I was going through these rankings thinking, okay, if I miss out on the elite tier of wide receiver, I'm happy going another direction. So you have Anthony Richardson at 8. You want to talk about that? And then I'll talk about why I have him a little lower.
He's a game changer. First, I'm shocked that I'm shocked that we skipped over me putting CD over Jefferson and Chase and you putting CD below Jefferson and Chase.
Hold on.
CD is 9. Jefferson's 10.
9.
Chase is 11 for me. But yeah, but he's
But
you have Jefferson 7 and Chase 8.
Well, yeah. Let's talk about that. Why do you have? Let's
WR1. This guy, CeeDee Lamb.
Really? You think CeeDee Lamb's wide receiver 1?
Wide receiver 1.
Tell me why.
Well, he has the most stable situation right now of all 3. And Justin Jefferson probably going to get Kirk Cousins back next year. We don't know.
Probably.
So there's a little uncertainty there.
Mm-hmm.
But CeeDee Lamb showed what happens when he gets the Justin Jefferson treatment in Dallas. They figured it out. Jerry Jones sat down and he watched Vikings film with Mike McCarthy. And at one point he just turned and he was like, why don't we do that? Why don't we do that with CeeDee this year? And it's worked very well. Brandon Cooks is going to be back. He's exactly what this offense needed. He's working the zones. He's stretching the field. He's doing exactly what he needs to get CeeDee those targets and keep him away from the double bracket coverages. You can't do it against Dallas. They have too many weapons. And this is a stable offensive situation with right now a stable coaching staff. And they're one of the most consistent teams in football right now. And Dynasty is a what have you done for me lately? We don't know what Kirk Cousins is going to be like off this Achilles injury. I hope that he is still the Kirk Cousins that we know and love. Kirk O'Chains. But we don't know. And then we go to Jamar Chase. There's a real argument to show that Jamar Chase is less productive when T. Higgins is not on the field. And that makes sense because they have no other weapons outside of Jamar Chase. So if T. Higgins isn't on the field, Jamar is going to get bracket coverage, 2 high safeties. They're going to play the game of shut Jamar Chase down and we'll win. Because that's assuming that the Bengals then draft a receiver and that receiver picks up the offense and hits. So we can see a down year for Jamar Chase. And I'm just going to roll with the situation that I think has the most consistency right now, and that's Dallas.
I think that's fair. I think also the other 2 wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, dealt with injuries, and so did Jamar Chase. And obviously, Jamar Chase lost his quarterback, so all of that affects it. We assume. I would still say out of the 3, I still like Joe Burrow, that with Jamar Chase, and I think Kirk Cousins is going to be back. And again, we play this in 2 to 3 year windows. So maybe in 3 years, maybe Jamar's ahead or CeeDee's ahead. But there's no denying what CeeDee Lamb's been able to do this year. He's the wide receiver 1 in fantasy points per game. I mean, just this, he started off a little slow. Like in the first 5 weeks, his best week was against the Jets out of all people. He finished as wide receiver 7. But then starting in week 8, wide receiver 1 week, had a nice week 8, 9, 10 stretch where he finishes the wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 2. And then like the last, 5 weeks of the season, wide receiver 11, wide receiver 16, wide receiver 9, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. So he didn't finish any lower than wide receiver 16. So it doesn't really get much better than that. So I understand the ranking. I'm really trying not to have recency bias, and I'm not saying that you are, but I still think that Jefferson's the better receiver. I think Kirk Cousins coming back. Same story with Chase. But again, this is not a hill I want to die on, but it's really, really close. If you and I were in a startup together and we were picking at number, where do you have them? Number 9. And you said, Seth, we got to take CeeDee Lamb and all your other players that were higher, and you were like pounding the table for CeeDee Lamb, I'd say, okay, let's take CeeDee Lamb. I'm cool with it. But I just think Jefferson and Chase are just a little bit better as talents, and their situations are just fine. So, but there's no denying what CeeDee Lamb has been able to do this year.
You know what Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase don't do, though, primarily? It's run routes out of the slot. It's a real thing. It makes their lives so much easier when you have a guy like CeeDee Lamb who moves in and out of the slot all the time. And it's so hard to provide consistent coverage. And in the slot, there's more separation. They're starting at a different distance. It's baked in. There's more separation. And with a guy like CeeDee Lamb, who just posted a higher route win rate season this year than any of those 2 have ever had, it's clear that they've found a path to doing exactly what Los Angeles was doing with Keenan Allen this year. Move him all around the field and just scheme him open. And until I see a defense that can, or a string of defenses that can consistently do that, Snowman was right in the chat. It's usually someone different as a wide receiver 1 next year, and that's a big possibility. But again, okay, try and pick who's going to be wide receiver number 1. It's why they call it gambling.
Yeah, I may have lost this battle. I think maybe you win. I think I might concede victory. I think CeeDee Lamb might be the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. I think you might be right.
He might not be. I don't know. No. They're all in the same tier.
That was a damn good argument. That was one of the best moments you've had on the show, Matt. That was very well done. I might have been living in the past on that, so I might have to reassess. But that's the beauty of this. Like, we can have conversations like this, and the chat can get involved and all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree with Stroud. I'm gonna be sitting there thinking about that.
Yeah. So let's talk Anthony Richardson.
Yep.
You have him at 8, just above your guy CeeDee Lamb. Talk to me about why he is that high for you.
Yeah, he's the end of my second tier quarterbacks, and if you're a tier 1 or tier 2 quarterback, you're gonna hold more value. Excuse me. This is why I shouldn't eat pizza before shows. Woo. Yeah. But if you're in that tier 1, tier 2 quarterback, these are players that are often going in the first round. Like, you have a 12-person dynasty startup. Doesn't matter what your rankings are. Odds are 7+ quarterbacks are going in the first round. And like I said, there's just a premium on the position, whether you're outside of it. Being in the top 12, the top 8, like a playoff caliber quarterback, if we're going to assume that the top 8 teams have the top 8 quarterbacks. No, that's not how it works, but that's essentially how dynasty value still operates right now. Where if you're going to be a guy who can be the 8th best quarterback or better in your league, that's a locked and loaded position that you can always have positional advantage over other people. We talk about why you draft Travis Kelce in previous years, because you're just always the positional advantage that you get from having a Travis Kelce is so much more beneficial than the marginal difference you get from going in X direction. And that's kind of the way I see Anthony Richardson up here at 8 is the positional advantage I get at quarterback over guys that decided to not take QB as seriously by having a guy with in Anthony Richardson who's going to have a load of weapons to deal with and a scary rushing ability. I mean, what he was able to do in the few games healthy this season, I mean, he had 29 points, QB2 in week 3, in week 4, but his third game. He had 22 points, 4th among quarterbacks in his first game as a professional, and he threw 37 times. He threw the ball 37 times in his debut and had 2 touchdowns, has 2 20-point games, nearly a 30-point game in 3 active games. I mean, this guy was potentially on pace to break fantasy. Like, he could have done things that we were not prepared for this season. He's going to have the same offense next year under, another year learning the system, and Shane Steichen, in investing in this team and building them up. So Anthony Richardson, I really feel like next season we're going to watch AR-15 go out there and we're going to be like, shit, I completely forgot that he tore it up before he left. And now I got to watch this guy all season. I don't have enough shares. I don't want that to be me. I don't want that to be me.
All right. I'm going to say this knowing that people are going to hate it. He has a higher upside than CJ Stroud does.
I've thought about that a lot today. I've thought about it a lot today.
Yeah. The reason he's 15 for me and not higher, he's the one player on this list that could shoot up this ranking. I just need to see more because we didn't see much of it, but he is in a perfect situation. Like, the Colts are doing it right. They actually pair up their quarterbacks with their coaches, unlike a certain organization in Chicago that just didn't know how to do business, but I digress. So he is in a really good situation Michael Pittman has already said that he's willing to play on the franchise tag. So he's likely going to come back. That is huge for a young quarterback. And Michael Pittman balled out this year too.
That's a
So,
big dub for the podcast. We were talking about him all offseason.
exactly. So that is so important for a rookie quarterback to have that number one legitimate wide receiver. Now, the Colts have some work to do to get him some more weapons, because outside of him and Jonathan Taylor, like they need a number two wide receiver, because Alec Pierce and Josh Downs. I guess Josh Downs played okay, but I don't know if he's a legitimate number two. I think they could use that. I think they could be a nice little home for T. Higgins if they decide to go that direction, or if they draft a wide receiver. The draft is full of wide receivers, but I just need to see more, because I'm willing to elevate him as high as you have. I just want to see more of Anthony Richardson proving it to me, because he has the potential to be. And like I said, he has the upside, the rushing upside that makes us just salivate in fantasy football, because let's face it, he has top three quarterback. I mean, he could be the top three quarterback in fantasy football next year. And I wouldn't be surprised, like right up there with Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen,
So
it wouldn't shock me.
So you're saying Rome Odunze to the Indianapolis Colts in the first round?
That would be great. He's like
who says no?
He's like a tall DJ Moore, is what Aroma Dunze is.
That would be incredible for them. I do love Josh Downs, and you got a point, right? Like, is he the number two? He's not necessarily a guy I'm rolling out there in two wide receiver sets. He's the slot guy. He's the guy you want to get in open space. He's quick, so he's quick and fast, so he can stretch the field, but he also works in that short area, gaining yak, kind of a similar role to what we saw Jaden Reed in this year. But yeah, I would prefer to have a guy like Odunze, who's also a game breaker. This is a horrible comparison, but like vibes wise and like in the role that they try to put him out in this year, he's just like a major upgrade, like a version of Alec Pierce.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. Yes.
Like they're both fast. They're both, the similar frame. And so that's basically all I'm getting at, but
yeah, no, I would love that. Like if they draft a wide receiver with that pick, in which they very well could. They have a lot of holes on defense too, so they could just decide to go that direction. They could also take one of those offensive tackles, and that would be great for. Even though the Colts had a bounce back year with their offensive line, you can never draft enough offensive linemen. I think that would be a good use of that pick. Whether that's Joe Alt. Joe Alt's probably going higher. Maybe Fashanu falls there. Maybe. But we'll see. Like the NFL draft is going to be bananas this year with all these wide receivers. But yeah, I guess it just comes down to like, this is the one player I had the most trouble ranking, because he has that upside that I target in fantasy football. I just didn't see a lot of it this year. And the completion percentage in the NFL, in college, it was an issue. I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. I thought he could work through that as a starter, but that's also concerning. But the rushing upside this is the player that could rise up my ranking. He could rise all the way up to, 8 easily, for me. So I even though we're at 15-8 right now, I don't think our opinion is all that different. I just kind of like some of these other, like I've got Dak ahead of him. I'm on Rob. We'll talk more about this, but Marvin Harrison is the first rookie off the board. Like we promised, these 2024 rookies are in here, but Marvin Harrison, you have him at 18. I have him at 14. Talk to me about how you feel about Marvin Harrison Jr.
So,
not Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah. So I think, again, we're in lockstep, actually, because I have him after Amon-Ra St. Brown, if I'm looking at so I have him as the next receiver after Amon-Ra St. Brown. So we're in lockstep as to where we are with our receiver rankings through this point, Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think we're ready to put Marvin Harrison Jr. over on Amon-Ra St. Brown. You know, we've seen dominance from ARSB, and we're going to continue to see that for some years to come. And there's still a lot of uncertainty with Marvin Harrison Jr. So this really comes down to the players I have that are not Marvin Harrison Jr. or Amon-Ra St. Brown in between them. And I have a quarterback, which I wonder how that discussion's going to go. Because I don't know where you have this guy. I feel like it's probably way down there based on our conversation about quarterbacks. And then I have 2 running backs in between Marvin Harrison Jr. So I have the tier 1 RBs and then Marvin Harrison Jr. right behind them. So I'm basically saying here that Marvin Harrison Jr. is as valuable as the tier 1 RBs right now. And I feel pretty comfortable with that. Marvin Harrison Jr. is incredible. He's a prophetic prospect, but nothing is certain in the NFL. We have no idea who he's going to be tied to. So right now we're, and a lot of people want to say talent over situation, but the situation matters a lot, especially when it comes to startup drafts and figuring out what you're going to be, right? So if you want to take Marvin Harrison Jr., you should be prepared to have to wait a couple years. Jackson Smith and Jigba. Look at what he did in Ohio State. Oh, he was dominant. He flopped year 1 because he went to a situation where he wasn't going to step up right away. So there's a lot of uncertainty there. And Marvin Harrison Jr., a lot of people are saying, not necessarily me, but is he the number 1? What if Malik Neighbors ends up being the better prospect, the better NFL player? There's a lot of uncertainty there. And if I'm on the clock, I'm going to sweat like hell trying to figure out if I'm going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. or Breece Hall. But that's just where I have him in the rankings. So, this is, to be transparent, it's not necessarily a situation I'm confident in. But it's where the rankings fell for right now. And, we have the whole offseason to kind of continue to evaluate that and adjust. And so, this is one of my least confident rankings. I can say that much.
Yeah. Marvin Harrison, to me, is the most talented wide receiver I've seen in college since I've been doing this, like for 7 or 8 years. He just is. And you're right. You're absolutely right. The situation's going to matter for him. Although, we do have the Tom Savage corollary out there with DeAndre Hopkins. And I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is an alien walking the earth in the form of a human being. He's amazing. I just as I'm going through my scouting process with these 2024 rookies, it's really something to behold the way he plays football. But we'll see, because this Ohio State situation is kind of getting weird. I think they're all going to declare because they got a big running back recruit. So I think Travion Henderson's going to declare, and I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is eventually going to declare. But as far as I know, they haven't yet, unless there's a news blurb that I missed. But I think he's going to. But anyway, getting back to the point, I don't typically like to rank rookies this high. But Marvin Harrison and Caleb Williams both are in a tier for me that I could see a world where Marvin Harrison is the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. Like, that's his ceiling to me. Caleb Williams, I think, can be a top 5 quarterback in Dynasty, like from the jump. I think he has that kind of talent. Now, situation's going to matter more for Caleb Williams than it is for Marvin Harrison. I think it's still going to matter, but Caleb Williams' situation is, does he get drafted? Like, does he get drafted by the Bears and Matt Eberflus, or does Washington take him with a new coach? That might be a better situation with Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. Like, who knows? But, yeah.
So what happens when Chicago trades back and takes Marvin Harrison Jr. and he gets entered into an offense, a low passing volume offense with DJ Moore?
We'll see now that. Yeah, that's problematic with Justin Fields. Yeah,
I fully see what you're saying, though, and I completely agree, which is why I said that. Like, this is another situation where, my gut or my heart wanted to bump him up and give him a pretty high ranking, and then my gut told me to stay, a little bit conservative because, like I said, again, we're still we're still in lockstep in our receiver rankings in terms of position and where Marvin Harrison Jr. is. And so, it's more of an on the clock decision. Do I go for my second quarterback off the board? Do I take AJ Brown, Breece Hall, or Marvin Harrison Jr. really at that point, if Amon-Ra's not available? And that's a sweat decision. One I don't look forward to having to make.
It's a huge, it's a risk, but man, I think it's a risk I'd be willing to take. I think
so too. Yeah.
Think of who we have him ranked ahead of. Like, we have him ranked ahead of AJ Brown, who had a really good year. We have him ranked ahead of Garrett Wilson, who I think is going to bounce back and was top 5 in a lot of the metrics we care about, including air yards and expected fantasy points per game. Like, his expected Garrett Wilson, which we'll talk about, like, had one of the biggest disparities that I can remember seeing, like, in his actual fantasy points per game and his expected fantasy points per game, because of the terrible quarterback play, and like the catchable target rate was off the chart, or like bad in a bad way, like in the wrong way. Yeah, exactly. So Garrett Wilson is absolutely a dynasty buy. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But yeah, I'm pretty bullish on Marvin Harrison. I feel like we're pretty much in lockstep on Marvin Harrison. And to me, like I said, I'll just finish it by restating that he's the best receiver I've seen in college since I've been doing this. And we'll see where he gets drafted, what his situation is going to be. But I think he is as locked and loaded of a sure thing as I've ever seen. But we'll see. We do have to take a break. I knew this would happen. We're just over halfway through, and we're at the 46-minute mark. So we gotta get an ad break, or not an ad, an informative segment. Yeah, an informative segment from the Podfather. So here we go. Stick with us though, because right after this, we're gonna get into the back half of our top 25, and maybe even give you, if we have time, some of the players that we didn't rank, talk about why we didn't rank them in the top 25. But here's a message from Underdog from the Podfather.
It has been 2 years since Josh Larkey paved the way for fantasy gamers to start expecting positive returns from pick'em games, specifically Underdog pick'ems. And how do you do it? Well, you look at a slate and you find a great shootout or a sneaky shootout. You also look for a shit show game. 3, 4, 5, 6 guys in one game. That's right. You can do it. You can do it. And you can 100x your payout on Underdog. Think about week 1. Jets-Bills was a shit show. Did we see the Aaron Rodgers injury coming? No, but we knew the Jets have a good defense. We knew the Bills have a good defense. Why not expect the worst? And the worst is what we got. So if you had gone Dalvin Cook less than, Garrett Wilson less than, Aaron Rodgers less than, Josh Allen less than, Gabriel Davis less than, boom, 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 you can go 6 for 6. Same thing in week 2. Week 2. Sneaky shootout there in Philadelphia. Minnesota's going to be in comeback mode, so we'll go Cousins, Jefferson, Hawkinson, more than, Madison, less than, but also Swift, more than. Boom, 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 boom. That's how you do it with the Underdog Pick'ems, and you use promo code Underworld to get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. You put in $100, Underdog matches that deposit up to $100 with promo code Underworld. Go start picking.
All right, we are back, and there's this show on the channel, Matt Babich, called the Dynasty Warzone. The time has changed from Thursdays at 5 p.m. to Sundays at 8 p.m. Be on the lookout for that. But what you should do is you should subscribe to the channel and get the bell so it alerts you of all the stuff that's going on the channel. But the Dynasty Warzone with Memphis Young, Jerry Sinclair, one of my favorite shows to watch. Both of those guys are as sharp as it gets. And, guys I have, very, they're very tapped in. I'm very envious of their process, and I try to replicate and take bits and nuggets from their show every chance I can. So be tapped in, be tuned into that show as it switches back to Sunday nights at 8 p.m. And I'm going to reveal the next 5 or so.
Yeah, I'm being a great co-host tonight. Seth tried to ask me to promote the Dynasty War Zone, and I was checking my bets, so I didn't see it. So
How the bets
right.
doing tonight? You doing
We're
okay?
doing great. We had Matt Duchene from the Dallas Stars, point scorer. He scored a goal in either the first or the second period. So that's good to go. Just waiting on some others here. Mostly NHL bets at this time of the year. You know me. But we got some comments related to football in the chat. Shout out to my dad. How's it going?
Oh, okay.
Bears will take Williams and restart the clock. I think I don't know. Let's hear from another resident Bears fan, Seth. What do you think about this? Because this is kind of where I lean will actually end up happening.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the comments made today, while they're just kind of pussyfooting around the issue of like Justin did a lot of things, but we have the number 1 pick and Caleb Williams is out there and we can restart the clock. And he wasn't a quarterback that we drafted, by the way. This is a quarterback that we inherited. So we gave him his chance.
Start the clock. Give us 5 more years.
Yep. You see, there's
He's
a
got to be
business.
comfortable with the system. You got to give him at least 2.
Yep, there's a professional element to this too, Matt Babich, and a business side and the financials. Like you're gonna have to pay Fields, in a couple years. Like look at what Daniel Jones got. You would think Fields would get something like that. It's just the market for quarterbacks. So, and that just killed in a salary cap league. That just
takes you.
Yeah, it takes away.
Still have 2 big playmakers on rookie contract, 3 big playmakers on rookie contracts in the Atlanta Falcons.
Yep, there you go. That would be. I think that's a good solution. But anyway, we could do a whole show. I could do a whole show on the Bears. Maybe I will someday. But oh my God. We are so different on AJ Brown. I think we need to start there.
How did this happen?
Well, why? I don't know, because AJ Brown, the last 2 years, he's been the wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game. He's the wide receiver 5 this year. He's in Philadelphia. I know Philadelphia lately hasn't been playing well, but he's number 4 in air yards. He's number 8 in targets in the league. He's number 7 somehow in unrealized air yards. So there's still some meat left on the bone here. Yards per route run, he's in the top 10. He's in these metrics that we care a lot about. He is very high, and we all know that AJ Brown's a stud on the field. So tell me why, Matt Babich, he's all the way down at number 22, which means you'd probably never draft him in a dynasty startup.
Why does that mean that?
Because he's like
so if I rank him down there, other people have him ranked higher. So he's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, if that's the way the cookie crumbles, then what can I do? So let's look at an AJ Brown's game log throughout the back half of the season and compare it to a random person that I may or may not have ranked above him. Okay, so let's just arbitrarily start at week 14. That's close to the fantasy playoffs. 20 points, 2 points, 43 points, 27 points. And I know it's week 18, but he did close it out with 29 points in a meaningful game. AJ Brown, 14 and 19 leading up to this. And then week 14, 16, 10, 14, 9, blah, blah, blah. Breece Hall and Jahmyr Gibbs are above AJ Brown in my rankings, and I think that's where this all comes into play. 16 for me, 19 for you, 17 for me, 21 for you. And then, I have Caleb Williams above him, which you do too. So who else do you have? You have him above Marvin Harrison Jr., and then you have him above Amon-Ra St. Brown as well.
It's very close between those two. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I can't deny what AJ Brown has done in spurts over the past 2 seasons. He has been the wide receiver 8 2 years in a row in fantasy points per game, but he is, approaching the age apex, whereas Amon-Ra St. Brown is, 24. So he's got, a few more years left of prime. And I know we just kind of had a discussion about the shortened window we play in, but I don't know. I'll admit that some gut feeling kind of came into this where I just couldn't put AJ Brown over Amon-Ra St. Brown from what I've seen from them and what I see in their offenses right now. But that being said, if Ben Johnson leaves the Lions, do we see a downtick? So there is some uncertainty in the coaching situation. I'm on Ross St. Brown. So there's certainly arguments to either side, but I feel like while he is ranked 22, it's still a lot closer than it's kind of making it seem. But yeah, I guess I'm a little lower on AJ Brown.
Yeah, and that's why we have the composite ranking. It averages it out, and we have him at tied right up with Marvin Harrison at 16. So yeah. Let's talk Caleb Williams. We're probably I'm gonna go ahead and guess that where we have him ranked, we're probably, if we were doing a dynasty startup based on these rankings, we're probably not getting Caleb Williams, because I would bet you at the end of the first round, early second round is probably where
He's
Caleb
gone.
Williams is
Yeah.
going to go.
Mhm.
That's just the way it works with these rookies. Like, anyway, so I think Caleb Williams could be an all-pro quarterback in the NFL. He certainly has the talent to do that. And again, I don't personally have any issues with the crying. I know some people do, but everything that we've seen on the field from Caleb Williams has told me that he's going to be a really good NFL quarterback. And I still believe he's the best quarterback in this class. And frankly, I don't think it's close. So he is deserving of this ranking. However, for me, I like a known quantity more than I kind of talked about it when I ranked Anthony Richardson, and we've seen him a little bit in the NFL, Anthony Richardson. So we should have a good idea, even in a small sample size, of what we're going to get out of Anthony Richardson, but I'm still skeptical. Caleb Williams, for me, like I said, he's got that top 5 quarterback in dynasty upside. He does. But for me, the way I dynasty, I like to take known commodities over these rookies. And I know these rookies are going to get shot up way higher than I'm willing to take them. So unless I'm certain that Caleb Williams is a generational can't miss NFL prospect, then, I mean, people thought, and I'm not saying they're the same player, but I saw Trey Lance going at like the 202 in SuperFlex Dynasty startups for the same reason that people are going to talk themselves into Caleb Williams. And they're not the same player at all. Like, Trey Lance went to North Dakota State or something and was a run first quarterback and only played 1 year of college. And Caleb Williams has put up way more stats in college than Trey Lance ever did. So they're not anywhere close to the same player. But if somebody was willing to draft Trey Lance, and I know he was with the Niners, so the situation matters too. And that, if they were willing to draft Trey Lance where they drafted him, like, Caleb Williams is going to just skyrocket up dynasty rankings as we get closer to startup season. But this is where I feel comfortable ranking him now. And again, he is a fantastic prospect, but there are some unknowns with him that causes him to slip down my rankings just a tad. And I like middle of the second round is really, really high for a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, CJ Stroud. Caleb Williams can be a damn good quarterback. It doesn't mean he's going to be scoring more fantasy points than CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson within the next 2 seasons, or even Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
Like Trevor Lawrence was before Caleb Williams, and before the revisionist history of Pat Mahomes, because he was not a highly touted prospect going into the NFL draft. Trevor Lawrence was the chosen one to end all chosen ones since his high school days.
Yep.
The guy literally didn't lose. And this was the prophetic prospect, literally, like, with the long hair and everything. And he hasn't had a top 10 quarterback season or fantasy points per game in his 3 years so far in the NFL. Doesn't mean I don't think Trevor Lawrence is still a damn good prospect and people are, or damn good quarterback, and people are overrating what has happened to the Jacksonville Jaguars this year. I still think Trevor Lawrence is phenomenal. Way more talented than the 13th. He's more talented than the 13th best quarterback in the league, like his fantasy points per game would state. But I mean, you'll see with my Trevor Lawrence ranking too. Like, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be putting him over some of these guys. I mean, that's where the situation truly does matter, and how, the teams are calling games. I'm actually kind of I'm in the middle of this. I'm talking to myself into bumping up Trevor Lawrence in the rankings. But yes, I agree with your point about Caleb Williams and taking proven commodities over rookies in these situations. Sometimes they just get boosted a little too far up for me.
Yeah, and your point about Trevor Lawrence is valid, because I remember, you see, when you're in enough of these startups, you start to see patterns, and that's why, I know that Caleb Williams would not be there if we were drafting by these rankings. I think Trevor Lawrence went middle of the first round before he had played an NFL snap, if I remember right. I'm sure somebody in the chat could maybe post their startup story of how high they saw Trevor Lawrence going in their SuperFlex startup drafts. But I seem to remember him being like the 107, 108, something crazy like that, like before his rookie season. So yeah, and of course, Trey Lance, and like, for me, like, I think your Dak Prescott point is really good. Like, Dak Prescott is like locked into a great situation. He's a veteran. You know what you're going to get with him. He has CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard. I know Tony Pollard didn't have a great season this year, but he has weapons. Mike McCarthy, be damned. Like, they could fire Mike McCarthy, bring in another offensive coach. It wouldn't matter. Like, the situation is pretty solid. And with Caleb Williams, he's young, but he's going to be a rookie, and he's probably going to be really good, but there's still more unknowns there. And I like to get as many knowns on my dynasty team as possible to build toward that super contender. So, Matt, let's reveal the last, we're going to have more than 25, just because you rank some inside the top 25 that I didn't, and I rank some inside the 25 that you didn't. So let's talk about this. So we're starting at Garrett Wilson. I have Garrett. We have a pretty big discrepancy there. I have Garrett Wilson at 16. You have him at 25.
We basically have Purdy and Wilson flip.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you're higher on Purdy than I am.
I've turned a new leaf.
Wow. Okay. We'll have to talk about that. I have Jalen Waddle ranked. You don't. You have Christian McCaffrey ranked. I don't. I have Chris Olave ranked. You don't. And I have Trevor Lawrence at 26, and you have him at 20. And you have Tua ranked. And I have Sam Laporta.
Nice little teaser there. Like, I might just put Sam Laporta in my top 25.
There you go. I made that change.
I was like, that was a good one, Seth. That was funny.
Yeah,
and then he's in your top 25.
I made that change right before the show started. No, I'm kidding. But let's talk about Garrett Wilson. I think Garrett Wilson is one of these dynasty assets that you're going to want to buy into this offseason. I think people are going to lower him a little bit too far. And we know Aaron Rodgers is coming back, and Aaron Rodgers has to be an upgrade over what they had. The coaching staff and the GM, they're back. I would not be shocked, given the Jets draft position, if they were in on, say, trading up for a quarterback. I don't know if that would be Drake May or Jaden Daniels or Michael Penix, but that seems to be a wise move for the Jets, to pair a rookie quarterback with Aaron Rodgers so they can sit and, learn from one of the greatest quarterbacks to play the game. Despite how I feel about him, he ruined many Sundays for me, but he's still a Hall of Famer. So again, Garrett Wilson, like, if we look at his advanced metrics, he should have been a lot better this year. And it's just the nature of fantasy football. If a player disappoints us, they're going to get dropped down the rankings in the offseason. People get that sour taste in their mouth, especially the more casual players. I mean, he was the wide receiver 26 this year, wide receiver 32 in fantasy points per game. However, he was the wide receiver 6 in expected fantasy points per game. That's like a 7-point difference. Like, that's an extra touchdown catch that he should have had, because his catchable target rate was terrible. It was number 6 amongst wide receivers. His unrealized air yards, number 4. Air yards, top 10. Target share, number 7 routes run, number 1 amongst wide receivers in routes run. So yeah, he's a total stud. Number 8 amongst wide receivers in total route wins. I just want to see him with Aaron Rodgers. Like, I think we're going to get that next year, assuming Aaron Rodgers doesn't crumble and fall apart. But regardless, the quarterback situation cannot get much worse than it was last year. And I think it's going to be wise to buy the dip on Garrett Wilson. Tell me why he's 25 for you.
Yeah, again, we can pretty much just label this episode like where the difference between our rankings just with how we value quarterbacks in SuperFlex and how we place that evaluation. Because again, like in a positional basis, we have Garrett Wilson at the same point of our wide receiver rankings. So I didn't disagree with anything you said about Garrett Wilson. I think something that kind of tears him down underneath the receivers that are above him is the fact that there's a strong possibility that Devontae Adams comes into town for the next 1 to 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And so
they were talking about that last year. I didn't think about that, to be honest with you. That's a good point.
Did you see he changed his number?
Who, Devontae Adams?
No, Garrett Wilson. He's not going to be 17 anymore.
Oh, what did he change his number to? Or does it matter? So you're saying
he cleared out number 17 already.
What's Devontae? Oh,
he's a free agent, I think.
He's a free agent?
I'm pretty sure he's a free agent.
Oh my God. That's probably going to happen then. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. But it's pure speculation at this point, but we'll see.
It's obviously pure speculation, and it's not like there's the possibility, right?
Because they were talking about that last year, how that made sense last year, and then Rodgers got hurt, and
I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. Devontae clearly doesn't. While he talked highly of Antonio Pierce, I don't think he necessarily wants to be in Vegas. He wants to try and win. He knows what this Jets team can do. And, Rodgers already kind of cleared cap space to get ahead of that. Garrett Wilson's changing his number. It makes all the sense in the world if he is a free agent. Okay. So Jay's in the chat. Shout out to our great producer, Jay. Says he doesn't think he's a free agent. So I might've been wrong there, but
okay.
Regardless, Brock is a guy who's highly efficient in an incredible offense that has weapons that are still built for the next 2 to 3 seasons. So I trust in a guy like Brock Purdy to be, if the people want to keep undervaluing him, that's going to be fine. And I'm going to keep rolling him out of my QB2 and SuperFlex. And because right now I'm in a SuperFlex league where I'm kind of rebuilding. I've just kind of put the pieces together and I'm rocking Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy at my QB1 and SuperFlex every week. And that's an incredible time. Let me tell you, if you haven't tried it, if you haven't tried pairing a tier 1 quarterback with Brock Purdy in your SuperFlex, it's pretty fun. And I'm a big fan. I'm a fan now of Brock Purdy. I've completely flipped the script. I've changed my priors, or my priors have not been confirmed. I've changed my opinions. I think Brock Purdy deserves to be a top 15 asset in SuperFlex Dynasty leagues right now, especially with the season that he's put up. I know we don't try to apply efficiencies season over season because things happen and efficiency is not very sticky, but I certainly love the situation that he's going to continue to be in. And that's why I have Christian McCaffrey in my top 25. He is a certified top 25 asset until he isn't. He's just one of those guys. Like Derrick Henry, is a little bit different because he never caught passes. He was always in between the tackles, bruiser, taking a lot of hits. Christian McCaffrey is a cheat code guy who you essentially just want on your team until he breaks. Because until he breaks, he's going to be a league-winning asset. So I think McCaffrey deserves to be in the top 25 as well.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. If we were in a league together, Matt, you the second round comes around, maybe we're at the back half of the second or of the first round, so we have an early pick in the second round. I don't know for sure, but I would like this just kind of player I am. I'd be like, I think we can get him in the third, or I think maybe we could trade up because I think I don't know. I think
with Purdy, I think so. I think you can.
Yeah, Purdy's one of those players that it just kind of depends on what league you're in to see like what his value is. Because you look at the numbers, like just the raw numbers. I mean, he's quarterback six in fantasy points per game. I mean, they're low in attempts, but number 20 in attempts, but they're good attempts. Like he's number 1 in yards per attempt. And he's got all those weapons. He's got like McCaffrey. He's number 1 in deep ball percentage, completion percentage. Like he's a good quarterback. Like I know he has all these weapons, and I know it's hard for me to say, oh, what would it look like without those weapons? Well, it probably wouldn't be as good because quarterbacks that don't have weapons aren't as good. Like just ask Patrick Mahomes this year. I mean, how's he feeling? You know, so like it's not his. It's kind of like if you were born with wealth. It's like, do I have to like, I don't know, like defend myself from this great situation I was born into? Like, do I have to apologize for it at every turn? Like, you know, like does Brock Purdy have to apologize for Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, and Brandon Ayuk? No, he's making the most out of the situation. And I know he's had a few stinkers. Everybody has bad games. Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't make it work. Trey Lance couldn't make it work. Brock Purdy's making it work. And they're the favorite to win the Super Bowl, I think, or one of the top 2, certainly. So yeah, I love Brock Purdy. I'm surprised you have him higher than me. But maybe it's just a reflection of how I feel about the quarterback position as a whole. I'm a little bit lower on it than you are, I think.
Yeah, I think I have Purdy over Caleb. I think other than that, I think our QB rankings are pretty close, and we flip Purdy and Caleb essentially. So we're again, it kind of all just comes down to how we value the quarterbacks as compared to the other positions. But quickly before we kind of close it out, I know we've gone a little over here like we always do, but talk to me about Waddle and Olave in your top 25.
Waddle, I think, is really good situationally in the long term, because we know tomorrow, like next season, or at least he said, Tyreek Hill said it's his last year next year, or, you know, so that tells me that Jalen Waddle is going to have a role in an offense with, I assume, a coach that's going to be there for a long time. I know he had a bad year this year. He's the wide receiver 34, but he was better in fantasy points per game, wide receiver 21 in fantasy points per game. He still had over 100 targets. He's in an offense that's dynamic. His yards after the catch, top 12 in all of fantasy football. Yards per route run, top 10 amongst wide receivers. He gets separation. He's number 13 in target separation while having the yards per route run, which is a combination that I absolutely love when I look at the metrics. And I think when I watch him on tape, I think he's a solid player that's battled through some injuries this year. So that's why I think Jalen Waddle's really, really solid. And I think his future outlook in that offense is really good, assuming Tua's the quarterback there, which I think he probably will be, unless they come up with a better solution. And I think he's going to be, after 2024, I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1 in Miami. And I think he's going to do really well in that role.
Yeah. Color me impressed with that one. I'm probably going to have to, but I haven't gone really past 25 yet, but Waddle's going to have to be up there. Now I'm looking at his player profiler page, and
I think Waddle's a guy who you wouldn't have to draft at 22. I think he's going to be like a 3rd round. Like I think I probably am higher than consensus because, like I said, I mean, he disappointed. If you had Jalen Waddle this year, he likely didn't return the value on his draft capital, both in redraft and dynasty, if you did a dynasty startup. But I guess in week 15, he was wide receiver 2 on the week. But there's a lot of like wide receiver 40, wide receiver 30, wide receiver 27, and not a lot of flashes. But there were some, but not what we're accustomed to from him.
Another thing that really sticks out, and I know that you have Sam Laporta at 24, and I don't know whether we should close talking about Sam Laporta at 24, the fact that neither of us have Puka Nacua.
I just think Sam Laporta is a locked and loaded sure thing at the tight end position. Like if you draft Sam Laporta, you don't have to worry about tight end probably for the duration of your,
Dynasty league. Yeah.
dynasty. Like he's 23 years old. He's the tight end 1 in his rookie year. I'd have to check. When was the last time a tight end was the tight end 1 overall in their rookie season? Has it ever happened? I honestly don't know.
I really don't think it has, just off the top of my head, though.
And he's in a perfect offense with Goff indoors with that offensive line, and I think that's going to likely continue into at least the next 2-3 years. But we know what kind of talent Sam Laporta is, and I think he's going to be a top 5, probably a top 3 tight end in fantasy football. It's funny, we were going into this season talking about, oh, if you don't get Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, just wait on tight end. And then you waited on tight end and you took Sam Laporta in your redraft league or your dynasty league. And now you have a top 3 tight end, like for the duration,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like you have Kelce, you have Andrews, and you were able to wait. So if you drafted Sam Laporta, you absolutely hit a home run.
Yeah. I don't think I think you're taking Laporta early if you're taking him at 24 in a non-tight end premium league. But like you said, the positional advantage could potentially be worth it depending on kind of where he's going right now, which I'm trying to go through the player profiler full dynasty superflex rankings to kind of get a gauge of that. He's at 36. So if you're taking him essentially a round ahead of ADP, maybe you traded back up into that round. There's, like I said, there's a million combinations for these things. So, I can get behind it.
Yeah. And by the way, you should be subscribed to the Player Profiler Dynasty Rankings powered by Theo Greminger, Dario Offstein, Billy Muzio, and many, many others that work really hard on those. So be tapped. Go subscribe to the Dynasty Deluxe package. I think gets you access to that as a little plug there because Matt's referencing that. And, we use those rankings to help us with ours. And anyway, it's a great service. So go check it out.
Absolutely.
So anyway, how do you want to end the show? Do you have a bold prediction or like a guy that you're truthering for in 2024 as we're very far away from the next fantasy season?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I could say it's CJ Stroud after what we've already talked about, but Breece Hall is RB1 and he's RB1. That's my take. That's my take that I want to end with. Breece Hall RB1. I said it long ago that he was the guy you were going to want to chase in your redraft leagues. And what he would have done with Aaron Rodgers and a competent offense is just disgusting. And we're going to get to see it next year, and I'm excited.
Yeah, I officially have to admit defeat. Maybe this is a good way to end the program on our Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery bet. Jahmyr Gibbs finished the year as the RB10.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't talk about that.
Yeah, RB8 in fantasy points per game. David Montgomery, despite missing multiple weeks with injury, I think 3 weeks he missed with injury, still the RB17 and the RB15 in fantasy points per game. But I think the point we're missing here is you got way more value waiting for David Montgomery in the 7th or 8th round than you did with Jahmyr Gibbs. But that wasn't
make a bet on value.
That wasn't the bet. You're right. So I lose. Matt wins. He can. I'll give it to you as a reward, and maybe this isn't the complete reward. You can have the last say here on the show. I'm not going to say anything else. Matt Babich, you close the show. You press the button. This is it.
Oh, this is my little this is my little FaceTime. Like I just went around the horn.
Exactly.
Classic.
Exactly.
I always wanted to win that show, have a little FaceTime. So I'm going to take this time to thank everyone for tuning into the podcast. You can catch us next Wednesday. We're going to continue our every other Wednesday cadence. And then Trade Gods. Also, so this channel is going to be live on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Central. So you should be tuning in. As always, thank you to Jay, our wonderful producer, and everyone in the comments. For myself, for Seth Diewold, no one cares about Aaron Rodgers. And good night.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.